It was one of those slow, overcast mornings in Portland where the sky feels like it's pressing down on you and the coffee tastes a little more bitter than usual. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, half-dressed, staring at the floor like it had answers. I couldn't tell you what exactly triggered it that day. Maybe a random scroll through Instagram. Maybe just waking up with that familiar ache in my chest. But the thought was loud. I should be further along by now. I've carried that weight around for years. This gnawing feeling that no matter how hard I worked, no matter what I survived, it was never enough. There's this voice that slips in when things are quiet, whispering that I'm behind, that I missed some crucial exit on the highway of life. And I know I'm not alone. I've sat across from friends, watched them smile while their eyes held the same kind of tired. We rarely say it out loud, but we all feel it, this sense of not measuring up to some invisible standard. It's wild how deep that message runs. From the time we're kids, it's baked into everything. Grades, gold stars, who made the team, who didn't. Later it becomes job titles, engagement rings, square footage. Life turned into a checklist, and if you don't tick the boxes in the right order or fast enough, the world makes you feel like you've failed. I've felt it scrolling past old classmates turned startup founders, or moms with picture-perfect homes and smiling kids in matching pajamas. Meanwhile, I'm just trying to remember if I paid the electric bill. What really gets you, though, is how invisible the struggle is. Everyone's got their highlight reel, and we end up comparing that to our behind-the-scenes bloopers. So even when you're giving life everything you've got, you still feel like you're falling short. It's like lugging around this invisible bag of bricks that no one else seems to notice. You show up, do the work, smile through the day, and go home feeling like you're still not enough. But something shifted for me the day a friend, someone I truly admired, told me over coffee, "I feel like I'm failing all the time." They said it so plainly, like they were admitting they forgot their keys, and it broke something open in me. If even they felt this way, maybe the problem wasn't us. Maybe it was the story we'd been fed, the lie that our worth is measured by output, by achievement, by the size of our to-do lists. What if the goalpost keeps moving because it was never meant to be reached? What if the whole setup is designed to keep us tired, striving, doubting, just enough to keep chasing but never arriving? The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't about me being lazy or broken. This was about reclaiming something I didn't know I'd lost, my own permission to exist, to be worthy without the hustle, without the performance, to just be. And I'll be honest, realizing that didn't suddenly fix everything. That voice still shows up sometimes, but now, when it does, I see it for what it is. A relic from a world that profits off my insecurity. And little by little, I'm learning to set that weight down. Not once, but over and over again. Every time I remind myself, I'm not behind, I'm not broken. I'm just human, finally waking up from a story that was never mine to carry. It was raining again, that soft kind of drizzle that never really stops in Seattle. I sat in my parked car outside the grocery store, hands on the wheel, engine still running. I'd just spent 10 minutes working up the nerve to go inside. Not because of anything dramatic, just everything. That quiet exhaustion that creeps in when life feels too loud, when you're carrying too many invisible things all at once. There are days like that, days when the smallest tasks feel like climbing a mountain in flip-flops. When you can't focus, can't find your rhythm, and everything feels off. It's not dramatic enough to call a breakdown, but it's not nothing either. Just a low-grade hum of doubt and overwhelm. And in those moments, it's easy to hear that old whisper again. See? You're falling apart. This is proof. You're not cut out for this. But here's the truth. I've had to learn, again and again, struggle doesn't mean failure. It means growth. And not the shiny, Instagrammable kind with success stories and motivational quotes. I'm talking about real growth. The kind that shows up looking like confusion, like tears in your car, like questioning everything you thought you knew. Growth is brutal sometimes. It's uncomfortable. It doesn't arrive in a straight line, with clear signs and warm applause. No. Real growth often looks like falling apart before you learn how to hold yourself differently. It feels like you're breaking because, in a way, you are. You're shedding old skin, old stories, old expectations that no longer fit who you're becoming. I've learned that the brain resists that process. Even when something isn't working anymore, an old pattern, a toxic job, a story that says you're not enough, your mind clings to it. Because it's familiar. Because it's safe. The unknown, even when it holds freedom, feels terrifying. So the second you reach for something new, something healthier, more honest, your brain starts sounding alarms. Telling you it's too risky, too late, too much, and that's where the struggle really kicks in. But here's what I've come to believe. If it feels hard, if it feels scary, if your chest tightens and your hands shake, you're probably doing something right. You're stretching, expanding, moving beyond who you used to be. Think of it like lifting weights. Your muscles literally tear so they can rebuild stronger. That discomfort? It's the cost of becoming. And yet, most of us don't talk about it. We hit the wall and think, this is the sign to turn back. But what if the struggle is the sign to keep going? What if it's the doorway to the life we keep saying we want? I think about that moment in the car a lot, not because it was some dramatic breakthrough, but because I didn't turn back. I took a breath. I turned off the engine. I went inside, not with confidence, not with grace, but with presence. And sometimes that's enough. Just showing up, even shaky, even unsure. Sure, because in that simple act, something shifts. You prove to yourself, quietly but powerfully, that you can keep going, that you can do hard things, that you're not broken, you're in process. And that process? It matters more than anyone sees, more than even you can fully understand right now, but one day you will. One day you'll look back and realize that the struggle wasn't a detour. It was the path. The kitchen light was buzzing, that faint fluorescent hum that makes everything feel a little colder than it should. I was standing barefoot on the tile, holding a cup of reheated coffee, staring out the window at nothing in particular. That kind of pause where your body's there, but your mind is lost somewhere in a pile of unfinished to-dos and half-remembered worries. That's when it hit me. How many small things I've done lately that I never gave myself credit for. There's this lie we've all swallowed that progress has to be loud. That growth only counts when it's impressive, shareable, or tied to some big milestone. But that's not how real change happens. Real change is subtle. It's quiet. It's the stuff no one claps for. Like getting out of bed when you really didn't want to. Like finally making that phone call you've been avoiding for weeks. Like putting your phone down and going for a walk instead of doom scrolling until your eyes blur. Micro wins. That's what I call them. Those tiny moments when you choose the harder, better thing. Not because anyone's watching, but because something inside you whispered, do it anyway. And they matter. God, they matter so much more than we realize. They're the foundation of every big shift that ever happens. But because they're so small, so easy to overlook, we brush them off. We don't even register them as victories. But they are. Every one of them is a piece of evidence that you're changing, that you're choosing differently, that you're becoming someone you can trust. I remember a few weeks back, I had to have a hard conversation with someone close to me, one of those talks where your heart pounds and your mouth goes dry before you even speak. And I almost bailed. I paced the living room for what felt like forever. But I didn't back out. I said the thing. Shaky, awkward, but honest. And no, it didn't magically fix everything. I was anxious for days. But deeper down, something shifted. I'd shown up for myself. And that mattered. That's how it works. One small choice at a time. One moment of courage. One decision to not disappear. It's how we build self-trust. And when you start trusting yourself, even in the smallest ways, your entire identity begins to change. You stop seeing yourself as someone who avoids and start seeing yourself as someone who shows up, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially then. And here's the beautiful part. Those micro wins add up. They stack on top of each other until one day you look back and realize, quietly, that you are not the same person anymore. That you've grown in ways that can't be measured by promotions or applause. You've become more grounded, more steady, more you. So if today all you managed to do was send that one hard email or take that one uncomfortable step towards something better, celebrate that. Really let it count. Because that's not nothing. That's everything. That's how the whole thing changes. We keep waiting for transformation to feel like fireworks, but most of the time, it feels like choosing to keep going. One unglamorous, quiet, deeply brave step at a time. It was late. One of those nights where the house is finally quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your own thoughts sound louder. I was lying on the couch, phone in hand, scrolling without really seeing. Engagement photos, career updates, perfect vacation snapshots. I'd been feeling okay, even proud of how the week had gone. But suddenly, it all unraveled. That old ache crept in, like I was losing a race I didn't even know I'd entered. Comparison sneaks in like that. You're minding your own business, maybe even feeling grateful, and then, bam, you see someone's highlight reel and start questioning everything. Their success becomes your shortcoming, their happiness, your inadequacy. And it's so fast, so automatic. Before you know it, you're spiraling, wondering if you've wasted your potential, if your life, as it is enough. I've been there more times than I care to admit. And even though I know logically that social media is smoke and mirrors, that I'm comparing my messy behind the scenes to someone else's edited moment, it still gets me. Because comparison isn't rational, it's primal. It taps into something old and deep in our brains. Back in the day, knowing where you stood in the tribe mattered. It kept you safe, fed, alive. But now it just leaves us tired, envious, and doubting our worth. What makes it worse is that it never ends. Even when you hit a goal, there's always someone doing it better, faster, shinier. The bar keeps moving. And if you don't pause to question it, you end up running harder, chasing things you don't even truly want. It's like being caught in a race without ever checking if the finish line actually means something to you. So I've started practicing something different. First, I catch it. The moment that sick, hollow feeling hits, I name it. Ah, that's comparison. Just calling it out makes it less powerful. Then I zoom out. I remind myself that I'm seeing one glossy moment in someone else's complicated, unseen life. I'm not seeing the late-night panic attacks, the fights behind closed doors, the insecurities they don't post about. I'm seeing the performance, and performances are always polished. But the biggest shift? I bring it back to me. I ask, what do I actually care about? What do I actually want? Half the time, the answer is so different from the thing I was envying. I don't want the jet, or the startup, or the six-pack. I want peace, connection, time, a sense of purpose. And when I realign with that, the noise quiets down. The craving to measure myself against someone else fades. And I curate what I consume now. I unfollow anything that leaves me feeling small. I follow people who are honest, grounded, who share the messy parts along with the wins, people who remind me that real life isn't always pretty, but it's real. And that's what I want to be surrounded by. Because the truth is, comparison will always try to pull you off course, but you don't have to follow. You can catch it, question it, let it go. And when you do, you find your own rhythm again, your own values, your own enough. That night on the couch, I put my phone down. I looked around my imperfect, lived-in home, and something inside me softened. I wasn't failing. I wasn't behind. I was just living my version of a life, one I get to define, one that slowly, quietly, I'm learning to love. It was a Sunday morning, the kind where the world feels still. The light came in soft through the blinds, and for once, the coffee was just the right temperature. I sat at the kitchen table with my journal open, not writing anything, just staring at the page. I'd been thinking a lot lately about everything I've gone through, the moments of doubt, the awkward starts, the quiet breakdowns no one ever saw. And it hit me. I've been building something this whole time. I just didn't know it. We talk a lot about growth, but we rarely talk about what it actually feels like when you're in it. Because real growth doesn't come with a soundtrack or applause. It doesn't look like a before and after picture. It's not neat, it's messy, confusing, often invisible. But under all the flailing and fumbling, something solid has been forming. Quiet superpowers, the kind no one sees, but that change everything. The first one? Courage. Not the kind that gets recognition or makes a big speech. The kind that shows up when you drag yourself to therapy or speak a truth that makes your voice shake. The kind that keeps you moving forward even when you're terrified. That's real courage. And it's not a moment. It's a muscle. One you've been building every time you chose to keep going. Then there's self-trust. That one snuck up on me. It started with the little things. Showing up when I said I would, following through even when no one else would have noticed if I didn't. Slowly, I began to believe my own word again, to feel like I had my own back, and once that took root, everything else started to shift. Because when you trust yourself, you stop outsourcing your worth. You stop needing someone else to tell you who you are. And then there's wisdom, the kind that only comes from walking through fire, from screwing up, learning the hard way, and coming out a little more clear-eyed. It's not flashy. It doesn't come with certificates or big life changes. It's just there, steady. A quiet knowing that wasn't there before. These aren't skills you pick up in a course. They're forged in the mess. And the best part? They're permanent. No matter what happens next, no matter how uncertain things get, those things you've built, courage, trust, wisdom, they're yours. They stay. So even if nothing external looks wildly different yet, same job, same apartment, same relationship status, you've changed. You've been becoming someone stronger, more grounded, more capable. And just because that progress isn't loud doesn't mean it isn't real. I think about all the days I thought I was failing when in reality I was practicing resilience, practicing self-respect, practicing letting go of the version of me that only knew how to perform and prove. And that practice? It's paying off. Not in the way I expected, but in the way I needed. So, if you're feeling stuck, if you're wondering what any of this is for, let me tell you, you're not stuck. You're solidifying. You're learning to stand on your own terms. You're building power that no one can take from you. That morning, I finally wrote something in the journal. Just a few words. I'm proud of who I'm becoming. And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. The wind had picked up overnight, and by morning the trees outside my window were swaying like they knew something was shifting. I sat with my hands wrapped around a warm mug, watching the steam curl into the air, and I thought about how far I've come. Not in the obvious ways. My life doesn't look wildly different on paper. But inside, everything's changed. There was a time I believed I had to be perfectly healed, completely prepared, flawlessly ready before I could take the next step. I kept waiting for some invisible permission slip, for the moment I'd finally feel like I had it all figured out, but that moment never came, and somewhere along the way, I realized it's not coming, and maybe that's the point. Because readiness isn't a place you arrive. It's a way you choose to show up. Shaky hands and all. It's saying yes to the next step, even when your voice trembles. It's trusting that everything you've lived through, Everything you've struggled with has shaped you into someone capable of handling what's next. I used to think my mess disqualified me, that the flailing, the crying in the car, the silent panic attacks meant I wasn't cut out for more. But now I see it differently. All of that was training. Every time I got up when I didn't feel like it. Every time I kept going when it would have been easier to give up. Every tiny win I didn't give myself credit for. That was me building a foundation. Brick by quiet, invisible brick. What I've built isn't flashy. It doesn't come with applause. But it's strong. It's steady. I've built resilience, not the kind that plows through everything, but the kind that bends and breathes and holds me together when life tries to pull me apart. I've built self-awareness, the kind that tells me when I'm pushing too hard or settling for less than I deserve. I've built courage, not loud or dramatic, but the kind that whispers, "Keep going," when everything in me wants to stop. And I've built trust, not in the world, not in outcomes, but in myself. That no matter what comes, I'll meet it. Maybe not gracefully, but honestly. And that's enough. So now, when that old voice creeps in, the one that says, "You're not ready, you need to fix more, do more, be more," I breathe. I remember, I am already enough. Not because I've arrived at some perfect version of myself, but because I've learned to stand exactly where I am, without apology. There's something freeing about realizing you don't have to wait anymore, that you don't need another degree, or 10 more therapy sessions, or the right person to tell you you're worthy. You already are, right here, right now, as you are. And yes, the road ahead is still unknown. Of course it is. But the difference is, I'm not afraid of that anymore. Because I know now I've got what it takes. Not because I'm fearless, but because I've proven to myself again and again that I can show up, even when it's hard, especially then. So if you're listening to this, wondering if you're ready, let me just say it plainly. You are. You're not behind, you're not broken, you're not missing anything. You're doing better than you think. And everything you need for what's next, it's already inside you. Keep going, you've got this.